Okay, everyone, how you doing? This is Frank with good buddy Mike Messier, film director and writer and a wrestling historian. Did I cover everything, Mike?
Acting coach, Avalonia Festival theater director, Avalonia Film Festival will take place December 8th in Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm looking forward to that. People can still send an entrance even at this late time. Go to distancefromavalon.com or look for Avalonia, Avalonia, if I spelled it right, or just go to MikeMessier.com and support your buddy Mike Messier.
And he's an all-around small guy.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I seem to be incurring a lot of passionate views. Some people are passionate about my passion, meaning that they love to hate me, they hate to love me, which is fine. But I think as a guy who just puts some videos up from the comfort of his own vehicle or the comfort of his own home or wherever I might be, I probably elicit more actual emotion from people than a lot of the WWE talent and a lot of the independent wrestling talent. And I know on this episode we want to talk about AEW in particular. AEW versus WWE, who's the babyface and who's the heel. I think it's a topic of our conversation.
Yes, right? And as we see in social media, in the IWC, you know, IWC is not a dirty word. We are on the internet, and we are the community of wrestling. People take such offense to that word, but it has been AEW has been polarizing across all wrestling pages. I know you belong to several. We belong to several of the same pages. It's become very polarizing. So far, we're in week 6 of their TV show. We're almost in the 10th. We've done 10 months of AEW as an official company. So, Mike, you want to do this as a retrospective.
Well, retrospective, but I mean, we don't have to get to every single one of our matches. We don't have to chronicleize every time the Private Party came out, how their theme music was played, or anything like that. But I mean, I would say an overview and kind of headed into kind of a landmark, I'd say, November 7th at the Royal Farms Arena, which used to be the Baltimore Arena, one of my old stomping grounds. I mean, this is the same venue that Sting beat Ric Flair in 1990. The Crockett Cup 87, Ronnie Garvin beat Ted DiBiase for the national title. This is the same building that Superstar Graham beat Bruno Sammartino, I believe, the WWF title. So they're going into a very historic wrestling capital, the Baltimore Arena, the Baltimore Civic Center. Now it's the Royal Farms Arena for a pay-per-view. I just checked the website. There are seats available. I'm not trying to sell their tickets. I get no commission. But if people were wanting to go, they can go live, or of course, however they do their pay-per-view. I'd say this. In my opinion, whenever there's competition, it's a good thing. Legitimate competition, not in-house competition between Raw and SmackDown or competing brands or whatever. When it's a real outside company that, as far as we know, despite Vince Russo's theories that WWE and AEW might be connected, of course Vince Russo was basically, I think, saying they might be, not that they definitely were. But I think it's good for the business as a whole when the fans have a choice and the wrestlers have a choice. When it's a dynasty, or when it's for 10 or 15 years it was WWE versus TNA, but it wasn't much of a competition. That's not good for the wrestlers, especially. It's not good
actually, like I pointed out the other day, TNA actually did peak at 2.1 million viewers. They actually did go up against Raw on Monday nights. I know, it didn't last long, but those are some goals for AEW to strive for.
Well, for the 2.1 million viewers, I'd say. For the 2.1 million viewers, I'd say, to go against WWE on Monday night, I don't know what the advantage would that be. I mean, they're only 6 weeks in, and they're finding themselves a little niche. I mean, now people are thinking of Wednesday nights with AEW, so it wouldn't make sense for them to just kind of go to a second night on Mondays, or to switch their Wednesday night show to compete with Raw just for the sake of doing it. I think a smart business works on its own in-house before worrying about the competition so much. I mean, sure, you worry about the competition, but you have to make your own product strong, your own fan base happy, and build your fan base, I would think, before taking steps to hurt the other guy. Which, as a lifelong wrestling fan, one of my grievances with WWE, Frank, is that they often seem to be trying to hurt other promotions. You go back to the 80s with Starrcade 87 was going to be the first pay-per-view for the NWA. Vince came along and did Survivor Series in 1987 as a way of hurting the competition. Same thing a few months later with the Royal Rumble on free television. As a way to hurt
he is a ruthless, him and Triple H, as John Moxley said, are both ruthless businessmen. I can understand them squelching the competition. If they're not going to make money off of it, then to them it's just a threat to take away money from them. But before we get to the wrestler part about it, I will say this: the good points. AEW has done. I'll give them an A+ in self promotion, in generating interest among their fan base. Right now, their fan base is rabid, hardcore loyal fan base, but I think we should point out, as I've mentioned, this is the hardcore fan wrestling viewer versus the casual viewer. I think that this is why I think we have a lot of polarization, which Raw and SmackDown are primarily targeted to the casual viewer, where AEW is just right now is just going for the hardcore wrestling audience.
Well, here's the thing, Frank, and I guess this is something that maybe it's a different topic.
Well, here's the thing, Frank, and I guess this is something that maybe it's a different topic besides the AEW, who's the babyface, who's the heel, but I'd love for someone to be able to find for me what a casual wrestling fan is at this point. What do you consider to be a casual wrestling fan?
Is someone
what does that even mean
who just tunes in, doesn't think about wrestling all week. Monday nights, Raw will be their go-to, but they'll switch channels to see what else is on. If there's nothing else on, or they're interested in Raw, they'll go back on. Same thing with SmackDown. Or, like I keep saying on my streams, it could be your mom who tunes in once a week, once a month, your baby cousin. Just a casual viewer is someone who just watches it casually and doesn't think about it too much or at all after the show ends. That's what I think the casual viewer is.
Here's my take on that. I think there's less and less and less.
And here's my take on that. I think there's less and less and less to the point of that. That casual wrestling fan, as you just described it, I don't think there's many left of them anymore. And I think that if it's guys like me and you and your buddy Jimmy and all types of interesting people, that most wrestling fans are either in or you're out at this point.
Okay, as you were saying?
I was saying that for me, your Aunt Wanda or the guy at the convenience store who puts gas in your car, the days of them saying, "Hey, did you see The Rock and Stone Cold, sing Margaritaville to each other?" Those days have come and gone. So whenever I hear people now, it's usually guys on the internet in a Facebook wrestling group talk about this hypothetical casual fan. I'd just like to see evidence that these casual fans exist, or more to the point, why does the informed or the smart wrestling fan feel it's their responsibility or their need to concern themselves with this hypothetical casual wrestling fan? Where is this casual wrestling fan, and why should anyone care what the fuck they think? You know what I mean? That's why they're casual, because they're not hardcore. Why don't the wrestling fans, the smart wrestling fans, care about each other or care about what they pretending that we're the promoter who cares about this hypothetical casual wrestling fan?
I know. It's just used to justify numbers and who's beating who's beating what. But yes, AEW so far has a hardcore following. Their fans seem happy. Their audience dropped. Of course, same thing like SmackDown. I believe their first week Dynamite was 1.4 million. I think they'll average around 850,000, 800,000. So my thing is when people say, "Oh, give them a chance," and they're just starting. Where's the word of mouth so far?
Well, look, I mean, they're 6 weeks in. I think it's a little bit unfair to think that a company, AEW, that's had television for 6 weeks is the fact that they're beating a company that's been around for 50 years in any type of way, in any type of number, is outstanding. I mean, WWF, going back to Buddy Rogers versus Bruno Sammartino, what was it, April 1963, if I got that right, versus a company that literally is on the calendar for less than a calendar year. Why should anyone be anything less than amazed or respectful of the fact that AEW has any type of advantage in any statistic over a company that literally has a 60-year advantage over them?
Oh, I agree. I agree. I'm just saying, looking at it from a long-term point of view, when they say it's going to get better, I don't see it. It could get better, but I think a lot of fans are hoping for. They're trying to relive WCW 1996, where this amazing Kevin Nash and Scott Hall are going to come in, and it's going to just start this new boom period. I don't see any wrestlers coming, any major stars coming to AEW.
Well, here's the thing, Frank. If I could, to me, what's the definition of a major star? Would that just be someone with WWE experience?
Oh, anybody. Let's just say. Let's say the Hulk Hogan of this. Let's just say he's not, but the Hulk Hogan of this era. Let's say John Cena. He in 2 years he's 47, and he just signs with AEW. That would be a major star. That might be a game changer.
It might be, but I mean, he would have his best matches behind him, and he would basically be doing it as just the cool hipster thing to do.
Right. I'm just saying. What if he came back as the character that everybody's been dying to see him in? You know, the suit and tie. Now he's the Hollywood actor, and he's a full-fledged heel, just like Hollywood Hulk Hogan. I think that might be what people are fantasizing about, but.
But I think for me, Frank, the thing is that AEW, not that they care what I think, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I would rather them concentrate, like I think Cody said, on creating their own stars. I mean, take that Sammy, not Sammy Zayn, but the young Sammy guy that pals around with Jericho and Swagger.
Sammy Guevara.
Yeah, Sammy Guevara. Okay, he looks very young, 22 or 23.
Yeah.
So why not play off of the fact that he's a millennial punk, he's a good-looking brat, he's metrosexual, he's annoying, he's gonna steal your girlfriend and share her lipstick, like all the things that real men like you and me, Frank, would hate on the surface. Play into that and make him a star. Some of the guys with WWE experience, like Neville turned Pac. Make Pac like a guy who wrestles 25 minutes on television 2 or 3 times a month.
Right.
Moxley / Ambrose has already got a lot of juice behind his character. And Jericho's 49, so we know that he's got 2 or 3 more years at this level, I would say, if that. So why not squeeze him for everything he's worth? A guy like Hangman Page, play up this horse riding guy thing, like show little skits of him on the farm, with his horse or whatever. I guess my point is, when people say that they don't have major stars, well, that's like, watching a new television show. When you saw The Sopranos for the first time in, 97 or 98, whenever it was, James Gandolfini wasn't coming off of a Hollywood movie to be in The Sopranos. James Gandolfini was Tony Soprano. So, 5 years later, he was doing the Castle film, I think, with Robert Redford, because The Sopranos made Gandolfini a star that a movie could invest in. Well, the point is, it's mixed mojo. Yeah, I get you. But the point is that rather than them trying to cherry pick, or I think WCW was able to do that, but obviously it only goes so far. They were able to get Macho Man and Hogan. We've all heard Bischoff tell these stories, but after a while, when you've done cherry picking the other guy's top talent, then your own creativity, your own ability to get guys over and make stars is what it comes down to. And I think that AEW is trying to do that. Whether they're successful or not is up to each individual. if they're successful with you or not. You know what I mean?
And I want to bring up, of course, the wild card in all this as far as stars is, what do you think about MJF?
I like MGF. I mean, I think that's the thing. That's the catch. Is just what I said instinctively. I like MJF, which basically means he's a heel, but everybody likes him. So unlike myself, where people genuinely dislike me and genuinely dislike some of my memes and genuinely like my vanilla midgets memes. I put the meme up yesterday of Daniel Bryan versus what's his face, Adam Cole, and I put the script. Dream of the vanilla midgets fulfilled, yes. MikeMessier.com, which was actually kind of a compliment to those guys, because I was basically saying that the Jerichos, the Benoits, the Eddie Guerreros, especially the Dean Malenkos, those guys that were labeled vanilla midgets by my personal friend Kevin Nash so many years ago, well, everything that those guys laid the foundation for was manifested in the fact that Adam Cole and Daniel Bryan are main eventing SmackDown. And people, of course, because they inherently have weakness, and they, meaning the people that were offended by my meme, they inherently are too sensitive to these wrestlers, as if these wrestlers owe them money or sleep on their couch or something, were so offended by this meme. But I was really saying, this is the manifestation of all the hard work put by guys.
Right, it's the realization. The realization has come true.
Right. Dream of the vanilla midgets.
Or if you actually want to go further, it's I think now it's becoming the evolution of wrestling. Listen, there's no more steroids. We saw, I don't know if you caught that, superstar Billy Graham had a GoFundMe post, and he encouraged Adam Cole to do a cycle of steroids.
Superstar is just looking for superstar at this point, you know?
No, I know, but I'm saying today's wrestler is not going to be as big as the wrestler of yesteryear, whether in height or stature. It's just not going to be. So I think this is the evolution of wrestling. I mean, in 2020, if you want to go that far.
Well, I'll give you another thing, Frank, is even not even steroids, but milk. I mean, let's put it this way: 20 or 30 years ago, probably the mid 80s onward, the milk that people drank was probably so infested with steroids from the cows that now, with all this organic milk and all this fair trade milk and grass eating cows, vegan cows, whatever the hell it is, that the milk is not jacked up with steroids. So people
and the chicken,
and the chicken. But no, it's true. I mean, people people that grew up in the 80s and 90s probably were eating tons of steroids without even thinking about it, because they were eating animal products that were full of steroids. So it's,
believe me, I in school I remember. In June, you'd leave school and your best friend was 5'2" and weighed 130, and then in September he comes back 5'10", weighs 160 pounds. These huge growth spurts were incredible.
That's right. So I mean, it is just one of those things where, in this case, oddly enough, maybe evolution is that people are getting smaller or more natural size is kind of evening out after 20 or 30.
And we could chalk it up to you there?
Sure.
And we could just chalk it up to the recruitment. The recruitment and the allure of wrestling is just not there. NFL players today, retired NFL players, don't have to go and wrestle because they're set for life. They sign a contract out of college. They're set for life. Where in yesteryear, if you had a rookie offensive lineman or defensive back, he tears his knee up. He had to make money, and so wrestling was a safety net.
Yeah, that's true. And let's go back to this this original topic: who is the baby face and who is the heel? What is your opinion on that? The promotion-wise, AEW and WWE, who's the baby face, who's the heel?
Oh well, right now, initially, it's AEW. AEW is the new kid on the block, and not only are they the new kid on the block, they're the new cool kid on the block.
So they're the baby face?
Yeah, but WWE is still regarded as Jim Cornette refers to him as the evil empire. Vince is the evil mastermind. WWE is always looking to mess with other promotions, put obstacles. So yeah, they are, and they've been around a long time. and their product has disappointed hardcore wrestling fans. So they're definitely the heel. But I will say this, and I pointed this out: AEW needs to stop throwing these industry insider references in their promos during because most fans don't get that. It goes over their head, and it serves no purpose. It doesn't draw any money, and it's just always it comes off as an over reliance on taking shots, and almost getting a rub from WWE by doing these references. I think they need to just stop mentioning them. I mean, we don't see WWE mention AEW, right?
Yeah, they did at the Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, but I mean on their TV, like during promos, during a random promo.
Well, Sami Zayn did a Q&A, and he said, "Why don't you ask me a question about AEW?"
Right. Well, actually, I did read that recently. He explained what happened. That was that night. I don't know if you remember. They were trying out that new segment. Remember, just
question and answer thing.
Yeah. He that was intentional. It was just to get. He explained it was just to get people talking and a buzz on it, but they're never going to do that segment again. So,
well, I mean, look, the fact is that they have mentioned AEW at the Hall of Fame, and I think Corey Graves apparently did some interview with Triple H, and Corey asked Triple H about AEW. If that's what I heard, I didn't see it myself, so who knows if that's right.
At least they're not referring to AEW as other parts of the world.
Well, I mean, I saw this thing about the new recruits of the Performance Center, and they said. They gave Scarlett Bordeaux's real name, and they said, also known as Scarlett Bordeaux on the independent scene, which I guess is that's their catch-all for Impact Wrestling. That's their catch-all for everything she's ever done besides them, is the independent scene. You know, man, it's one of those deals where WWE has always had a really particular and curious way of dealing with competition or other promotions. And it's kind of like, you know, I think it was a year ago or so that they made some references to TNA after TNA had more or less changed their name and become Impact Wrestling. It wasn't really relevant.
Yeah.
After all that time, they felt the need to make some Impact reference. They had Dixie Carter on the Kurt Angle, documentary on the WWE Network. They had AJ Styles in Impact Wrestling, like I want to say that Something Else to Wrestle With did AJ Styles and TNA with Bruce Pritchard, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, so, I guess we could consider they probably considered that TNA war is long over, so now it's okay for them to reference them. So let me bring you to it. Let's go to another topic. We've heard now everybody's an EVP in AEW. The wrestlers are booking the shows. The young we've heard Kenny Omega is putting together the female matches. The Young Bucks putting together the tag team matches. Cody's probably the head of creative. So how do you think this is going to work?
Well, it's okay. It's what I would report on is that, you know, I think it was week 3 was my favorite week of AEW. They had a lot of good tag team matches. They had, it was like a tag team night. Like, for whatever reason, like, they maybe had 7 matches and 6 were tag team matches. I think it is an interesting thing where, look, it's interesting. I do find myself, like Cornette, enjoying the Cody Rhodes kind of drama-based matches the most. But I will say this: I've enjoyed a lot of the tag team matches. Who's booking that? Is it Christopher Daniel, or we don't know?
I read the Young Bucks are putting together the matches. A lot of the tag team matches.
Okay, well, look, I think that the tournament for the tag team title at AEW was pretty well run. I was expecting the Lucha Brothers, and of all the wrestlers in the world right now, Pentagon Jr. is probably my favorite wrestler right now of the current people. I mean, Flair's my all-time favorite, but for whatever reason, Pentagon Jr., despite the fact that he sold some horrible goofball arcade magic maneuvers from the Young Bucks and Omega in that 6-man, apparently, I guess I blinked when that happened, but Pentagon Jr. is terribly fascinating to me, and Rey Fenix is almost there as well. But I think it was good. You know, I was expecting them to win the tag team title tournament. They lost in kind of a small package by their opponents. But, I mean, I think the tag team tournament was really pretty damn good, to be honest with you. I think that the women's division I get her name wrong all the time, but their current champion, is it FIFO or Fido? Or
Riho.
Thank you. I always put an F. Sorry, Riho. But I mean, I think she has a flair for the dramatic. I mean, she sells like Pedro Morales. I mean, if you ever watched an old Pedro Morales match, what made it so interesting was the guy wasn't, good in the sense of he had all these big maneuvers or he was, a legitimate wrestler like a Bob Backlund. But Pedro Morales would take a fucking ass beating, make you believe that he was getting hurt, and then somehow he'd rally to win. And I think this Riho...
See Hulk Hogan. See Hulk Hogan.
Now, the difference was that Hogan was 300 pounds, and in a legitimate fight, you'd think he would win. Whereas Pedro was smaller than most of the opponents, Stan, stage actor, whoever. And Riho is obviously smaller than a Nyla... not Nyla...
Asuka?
No, the woman that she beat for the title in the tournament final, the native beast, Nyla
Rose.
Yeah, am I getting the name right? Nyla Rose. Yeah, right. So the point is that Riho, she gets you to be sympathetic towards her. Is that the point?
Right. She that's that. Well, that's the trick. You have to draw sympathy and empathy. Otherwise, nobody cares about you.
When she beat Britt Baker a couple of weeks ago, and Britt Baker had her in that move, that mandible claw, the dentist claw, and Riho was able to reverse it into a roll-up pin, the fans actually cheered. And it's very interesting that the fans cheered for a champion retaining their title, because most times if you're at a live show, whether it's televised or not, people want to see a title change. That's just kind of inherent. Like, even if you saw Triple H versus Steve Austin in 1999, you would cheer for Triple H to win the title. Or if he did pin Triple H, if Triple H, the heel, pinned Austin, boo, you would cheer because you saw a title change.
Right.
What I'm saying?
Well, yeah, everybody pops.
Right. If you see something happen live, you typically pop and you cheer. But in this particular case, the champion defeated Britt Baker, and the fans cheered, which I thought was testimony that this young lady or woman is over as a champion.
Right.
Riho.
And it's also what you just pointed out is it's good psychology, the way she countered the mandible claw, which brings us to the next subject: psychology. Not just in AEW, but all of wrestling.
Right.
A pet peeve of mine is, and you probably agree with me. This I don't have a problem with fast-paced wrestling if it's done in segments, but this fast-paced wrestling with all these fancy moves that don't do nothing. Wrestlers are popping up 5 seconds later. Fresh as a daisy, they're spamming the kick out of twos. Are you a fan of this, or as a fan of old school wrestling, where you'd have Ric Flair tell these stories in the ring? What's your take on this?
Well, my least favorite move of what you're probably describing, Frank, is when a wrestler shoots off the opponent to the ropes. The defensive wrestler bounces off the ropes, comes back, and then kind of like flips in midair, and now is in the air but has their face down and kind of spreads their thighs across the opponent's waist, like kind of giving themselves over to the opponent, who then picks them up and slams them down. And it's like, if you were a wrestler and you get shut off the rope, what would be your motivation to kind of jump in the air, flip around midair to go to your belly, face down, and stick your thighs on your opponent's waist? Like, what are you trying to do? If not get beat up, So I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of common sense with the wrestlers. Like, that move is clearly a gymnastics move, and the aerodynamics of the move make absolutely no sense. I'm going to bounce off a rope and throw you my crotch in your stomach so you can slam me on my face. What the hell are you thinking?
Right.
And sometimes I think what happens they talk about the pro wrestlers are in a bubble, that they're such in this fucking bubble that they're in, they don't realize that some of their stuff looks stupid. I mean, and not to say all of it, but even that match that I liked, that Pentagon Jr. and Ray Phoenix versus SCU, there's tons of stuff in that match that I didn't like because it was over choreographed. It was overly oh, we worked this out in the dressing room, brother, and let's go out there and I do my flip, you do flip. He comes in, and it's almost like a disease that no one has the balls to just, like a Tully Blanchard should take these assholes aside and say, this is what me and Magnum did when we tore down the Greensboro Coliseum and he had a wooden stick in my eyeball at Starrcade 85. Like, what those guys need is a guy like Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, who I guess are both associated with AEW.
Dean Malenko.
Dean Malenko, perfect. Like, have those guys do a seminar and say, look, we know what you've been doing for the last 15 years. And it really started more or less with Ring of Honor, this high-flying stuff in the early Impact Wrestling, the TNA, 2003 era I'm talking about. This overtly gymnastic-based wrestling, they need to tone that down, in my opinion, because it does that style, that choreographed style, it takes away from the believability. And yes, blah, 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 we all know it's a work, but you want to suspend your disbelief. You want to be able to get into this thing. And that's why I'm not a big Kenny Omega fan. His wrestling, his work, whatever you want to call it, seems very choreographed to me, very presentational, very orchestrated, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, everyone's got their options, everyone's got their opinions, but for me, I'd rather see a Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson versus the Rock and Roll Express against, something like this, choreographed stuff. But if the choreographed stuff is all we have to choose to watch,
right? That's a point of reference.
You know what I mean? That's what we have, I guess.
Right. My point is, what if in a Kenny Omega match, when he finally does make his comeback, he uses one of these spectacular aerial moves as a setup move, and then he could go to his finisher. How much more impactful would that be? Go, wow, did you see him? He pulled that move out of nowhere. He stunned his opponent, and then he hit the finisher. And then guess what? 1, 2, 3. The guy stood down.
Guess what, Frank? I mean, I'll be honest with you, man. I haven't sat there and watched these epic Kenny Omega matches. You know why? Because to me, Kenny Omega disgraced professional wrestling by wrestling a girl. He disgraced professional wrestling by wrestling a doll.
By the way, that's I was going to say Rio is allegedly the younger sister of the girl he wrestled.
Whatever happened to the girl he wrestled? Because I mean, although I was disgusted by the match, I'd hate for her to not have had a good life and done something with herself. But the point is that I can't lend Kenny Omega any more of my valuable time on this earth. I'm not going to give him an hour of my time if he's going to disgrace professional wrestling and spit on the corpse of Lou Thez and spit on the corpse of Road Warrior Hawk and desecrate professional wrestling as I see it. Then he doesn't deserve my eyeballs for an hour.
Right.
That's all.
What is it? They're spitting in their graves so fast they're drilling to the core of the earth.
Well, it's just a thing where, like, look, we all have limited time on this earth, Frank. And, for me to sit there and give Kenny Olivier or Kenny Omega an hour of my day, I just don't want to do that. I'll give Pentagon an hour of my day, but Pentagon Jr., but I mean, some of the things, what I heard was that in one of those early AEW shows, the Fyter Fest, that the Bucks and Omega did like some type of magic ball thing, and they attacked the Pentagon team with that.
Right.
And this is what happened. I was watching that show. I had one computer on, the other computer on, and I must have just turned my head and I missed that thing. And I'm glad I did, because that would have really pissed me off. That would have lowered my feelings for Pentagon Jr. if I had seen him sell for that crap.
Right. So let's go back and to the subject of vanilla midgets. How about when I coined the term vanilla dwarfs, even smaller than vanilla midgets, like let's say a Marco Stunt, who triggered people like myself and other wrestlers. I mean, do they have a place on TV?
Well, let me tell you something, Frank. It reminds me that I met Jameson. Remember Jameson with the Bushwhackers?
Yes.
I met Jameson at the 2013 New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame run by my friend Joe Bruin, and I spent 45 minutes of my day watching the one-man show of Jameson. Like, he did a one-man comedy show. The guy's hilarious. And then he and I actually hung out at the bar, and I had quality time with Jameson. And he's a guy who works out. He goes to the gym. He's probably a guy who's 5'8", 5'9", regular guy, just a cool dude. He doesn't look like a dorky weirdo when he's not in Jameson outfit, but he's just a cool guy. Now, what I'm doing is I'm making a point that Jameson had his spot in pro wrestling as a manager for the Bushwhackers. But you would never expect Jameson to main event Madison Square Garden against Bret Hart in 1994. Right. Similarly, this Marco stunt was, as far as I could tell, supposed to be the Jameson-esque, manager buddy of Luchasaurus and the other guy.
More like that mascot. It almost comes off as a mascot.
Yeah, their mascot. Now the big thing was Luchasaurus got a leg injury. Was it a quad injury or some type of injury? Hamstring, right. And so they need their team of Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus was down a man. Now, what they could have done is they could have brought in some other tag team from the indie scene, or if they had somebody, or they could have had someone wrestle 2 matches that night, or they could have done a bye. They could have postponed the match and figured out something else later. But instead, they kind of took the easy, hey, Marco's here, put him in the ring. Now, I don't really have a problem with Marco being in the match, and I don't even have a problem with him doing a few moves. I guess what I have a problem, if I do have a problem with it, is his moves were actually pretty good. I mean, you have to give the good, but the question is, should these guys have sold for him? Should Pentagon and Ray Phoenix sold for him? Should they have made him look as good as he did? And I don't really have the answer for that, except to say that I guess they felt like if we don't sell for this kid, then he's never going to be more than a runt. He's never going to be more than a little jerk. And to their credit, Pentagon and Phoenix, they did end up winning the match, of course, but I guess they felt that they wanted to put the kid over a little bit and cause a little stir, and that's what happened. But he didn't win the match. I mean, we'd say
I understand. Yeah, but I'm just saying, my point is it does put the other wrestlers in a precarious situation of having to sell for somebody like Marco Stunt.
I can't say that I was there, and I don't know this for a fact, but seeing how Pentagon Jr. and Ray Phoenix seem to be very generous with their wrestling and selling for magical fireballs or whatever for Omega and the Bucks, I have to think that those two guys wanted to sell for Marco Stunt. I don't think Cody or the Young Bucks came to Ray Phoenix and Pentagon and said, hey, we need you guys to sell for this punk.
Well, they would be professional. They would be professional.
Right. So, I mean, I guess it's one of those things, Frank, where there's some guy in Somalia eating a fly sandwich for dinner and some girl in New York City sleeping on the street corner looking for a fix of heroin. And here we are debating how much Ray Phoenix and fucking Pentagon Jr. should sell for Marco Stunt.
I know,
you know what I mean?
I know.
So what the hell?
So what do you think AEW needs to improve upon or do to keep developing?
It's a great question. I mean, I think here it is. I think they have to start looking. They have to start thinking in terms of champions. 2 or 3 champions down the road. So I think you go from Jericho. Whether Jericho comes out of this match with the title or not against Cody, I think that Cody would probably be the next champion. If he doesn't win it at this pay-per-view November 7th, I think he'll probably win it in December or whatever. Or maybe the next pay-per-view. Maybe they'll hold out. Then I think they've got to start planning. Okay, we don't really, in my opinion, they should stay away from the Cody Rhodes as Jerry Lawler in Memphis, thing. Like it shouldn't be just Cody, and Cody lost and then he beats a guy. And they got to think in terms of if they do go to Cody, who comes next? Is it Pac? Is it Moxley? Is it whoever? I think what they really need is I do think that Jericho's done a pretty good job as champion at 49 years old, but I think they want to have their kingpin And long term, I don't think it's Jericho because he's 49. I don't know if it's Cody. I don't think Cody needs the title.
I think Cody wants to do a representation of the old school NWA champion.
Well, a friend of mine, my buddy Tommy DiNucci, said that Cody, maybe to the chagrin of his father's spirit, like Cody is the babyface Flair. Like Cody is the good guy who's kind of like, nice cup, by the way.
Thank you.
Cody is like, what is that, from a restaurant or something?
I don't know. My mom picked this up.
It's a nice cup. It's very colorful. But Cody is like the babyface Ric Flair. And I think Nick Aldis is doing a great job as NWA champion, but because he's with the NWA, he's not going to be available for AEW unless they do a talent trade. But, I mean, who else could be their champion long term? You got guys like Moxley. It's a little too wild to be champion. Pac is kind of interesting, a little bit too small for heavyweight, perhaps.
Maybe MJF down the road?
Yeah, down the road. But, I mean, I think MJF, down the road could be a great champion. Hey, Jim Ross slipped, and Jim Ross called him little guy or the little fella, meaning MJF. And then Ross had to scramble to correct himself. So, I mean, I guess that's the point where we've hit like 3 or 4 names. I guess a lot of fans would be screaming and hollering that neither one of us said Omega. He'll definitely be up there. He'll definitely get us there. Right. But I guess my point is, like, sure, there's guys that could have the belt, but is there people like a Jericho and maybe like a Cody that can transcend AEW and be like a mainstream champion? And the answer to that is why I'm a little stumped. I think that's why I'm saying that a great thing for them to concentrate on now is plot that out. You know what I mean? Yeah. So let me ask you. I guess maybe we'll close out with this. AEW build themselves as the healthy alternative to I guess the WWE. I know that's just a PR slogan. But have they been a healthy alternative so far, or have they been WWE 2013 mixed with? No. I don't. Well, it's interesting. I'm not sure why you said 2013.
Well, I'm just saying we got Cody Rhodes and Dustin Runnels and Chris Jericho. It almost has that old school WWE feel to it.
Oh, is 2013 old school now?
yeah. Listen, that kind of is.
Yeah, I hear you. I guess. No, when I watch AEW, I mean, if anything, I have flashbacks to Nitro, like 96, 97 Nitro. It has, there's a certain gray quality on TNT, like meaning that there's like a color theme almost of gray. Maybe it's the cameras they're using or the color of the ring apron. To me, AEW feels like some type of hybrid, of a WCW, mostly WCW, to be honest, like, peak Nitro, like 96, 97, even before the NWO Nitro. I don't really see them as being a WWE rip-off. I think it's one of those things where if you grew up in the era, say, of like 2001 onward as a wrestling fan, your view of wrestling is very WWE-centric because all you had was WWE way up top and TNA or Impact like 10% of what WWE was doing. If you have wrestling fandom in the WCW days and the Jim Crockett days, the UWF, World Class, AWA, ECW, if you have experience as a fan in that generation or two, 70s, 80s, 90s, then you remember when things were more than the WWE. I think a lot of the hate of AEW right now by certain fans is by a generation of fans who grew up with WWE as the end-all be-all, so they see anything else that comes along as inferior, and they're basing things such as TV camera quality or production quality. They're basing things like exposure or the amount of fans, other fans that are watching mainstream media. And for a lot of wrestling fans, Frank, we didn't care about that stuff. Like we didn't care if World Class Championship Wrestling, had the best cameras or not compared to, say, the AWA. We just said, well, Nick Bockwinkel could have beaten David Von Erich in 1983. You know what I mean? Like it was just a different era of thinking. So some of these things are because we've had a whole generation now of almost 20 years of mostly WWE-centric fans. Their vision of what wrestling is supposed to be is skewered or tainted or warped by Vince McMahon's priorities, and that wasn't the case 30, 40 years ago.
Right. And speaking of the gray, which I think could be a reference to AEW's philosophy of no heels, no baby faces, just shades of gray. I think their take on this is we're not going to tell you they don't want to tell the fans who to root for. They'll let the fans choose who to root for. What do you think about having no heels and no baby faces?
Well, I don't know if that's the case, Frank. First off, because if you take a look at that skirmish, that outside the ring act, maybe it was a week ago or the week before, where Cody, MJF, DDP, and there's one other guy, Dustin Rhodes, went up against the Inner Circle minus Jack Swagger, so Jericho, the tag team, and Sammy. There was clearly an indication.
Yeah.
These are our baby faces, these are our heels, and the fans were into it. Like, the fans legitimately wanted Cody the baby face to beat up Jericho the heel, and having MJF and DDP and Dustin, those were all clear baby faces.
Right.
So now some of the other things, like for instance, where it does get a little blurry, where I do agree with you, is that tag team title match, the tournament final of Pentagon Jr. and Ray Phoenix against SCU. I guess in theory, SCU was the baby face, and Phoenix and Pentagon, if that's my girl, tell her I'll call her later, Frank. But Pentagon Jr. and Ray Phoenix, to me, that's my babyface team, because I respect their athleticism. I respect their flair and their style a lot more than I do SCU. But the way that match was programmed was for you to cheer for SCU, and I just didn't agree with that.
Right. I think that's just a little bit of lip service of working the fans. Of we're not going to tell you who to root for. No baby faces, no heels. But it's always going to develop into baby faces and heel dynamic.
Yeah, look, I mean, for whatever reason, this makes me think of a woman's match I saw in an independent show about 7 or 8 years ago. It was in Fall River, Massachusetts, and I think it was actually the last match on the show, because the two biggest stars was Mickie James versus Maria Kanellis, believe it or not. And so both of these women had WWE experience. They were both in between WWE runs, but they were clearly the biggest stars on the show, so that's why they were given main event status. But it's like, well, who do you cheer for here? I mean, obviously they're both gorgeous. Obviously, Mickie is, a better wrestler, and Maria, has a better ass. So, I mean, who do you cheer for? It's who you want to cheer for. But, I mean, I think at the end of the day, Maria just did some things that made her the heel.
Of course, because she's the sexy, cool. The guys will never sniff her panties. Where Mickie James is more of like the girl next door. Last subject, since we're on the subject of healthy alternatives, what do you think about these segments with as Orange Cassidy, as Jim Cornette refers to him as Pockets, doing these kicks, and the best friends doing the hugs in the ring? What do you think about these? If these were on WWE, we would scorch the earth.
It's indie-rific crap. I mean, it's stuff that played for groups like Beyond Wrestling that I saw a couple of shows in Providence years ago. These bar wrestling groups, that the cutesy stuff that I'm not really into. I would say.
You there?
Okay, so Frank was asking me about Pockets. Orange Cassidy. I'd say that the best thing about the Orange Cassidy thing is that the opponents typically don't sell for the kicks. Like, they'll get kicked in the shin, and then they'll kind of look like, are you kidding me?
Right, this is clearly comedy relief.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, ECW was the most, violent, vicious promotion. But do you remember the dance-offs? I mean, do you remember the Blue World Order and the little Guido doing a dance-off all the time? I mean, so, it's one of those things where, like, there is a place for a comedy spot here and there. I think that what gets Cornette and probably gets me as well, I know that it does, is when Ken Shamrock sells for Joey Ryan, or Ken Shamrock engages with Joey Ryan's dick flip, and Mick Foley engages with Joey Ryan's dick flip.
Right,
now,
right.
Luckily for all of us, Joey Ryan has been sequestered to Impact Wrestling. So,
sequestered.
We have to see him.
Oh my God, that's funny. So, anything else you want to add to this?
Well, I had the thought, one thing that I think is big about AEW that maybe we should have mentioned a lot earlier in this dual podcast, and thanks for putting this together, Frank. I know you're busy. You got some things going on in your life that's important. But I do like this idea that they're going to do a weekly show, at least for the time being. AEW is doing a weekly show and then 4 pay-per-views a year.
For now.
For now. But I'll tell you why I like that, Frank, because that goes back to, say, 89, 90 WCW, which is like, we're not going to expect you to pay, 12 pay-per-views a year. I guess they're not doing the network for now. Maybe they'll do their own AEW network at some point. But for now, it's like kind of an old school, we've got our 4 tent-hole events, like Dusty would have done, his Bunkhouse Stampede in January, his Crockett Cup in April, his Great American Bash in July, his Halloween Havoc, and then his Starrcade. But in this case, 4 pay-per-views, whatever they turn out to be. And then you have your weekly 2-hour show, and then your Dark, which is like your hour before or after, or whatever, that they put on YouTube. The point is, compare that. That's a digestible menu for a wrestling fan for giving your life over to watching other men do something for 2.5 hours, 3 hours a night, as opposed to WWE that says, you've got to watch Raw, you've got to watch SmackDown, you've got to watch NXT, you've got to watch NXT UK, you've got to watch all the shows on our network, you've got to watch Renee Young talk about her Fox money, and
it's too much. It's
too much. And I think what WWE may or may not realize is when they give you too much, some people like myself feel like they just want to shut down. Like they just say, you know what, WWE is expecting too much of me.
It's overload.
It's overload, and my solution is not to pick and choose or to go to the Dave Meltzer Observer or YouTube clips or whatever and get the highlights. My solution is to say, you know what, screw your company. I'm sick of you. I'm shutting down, and maybe I'll check in if there's some huge Becky Lynch versus Shayna Baszler match versus Bayley or something. If there's something that I really want to see or something that really gets my attention, I'll come back. But for the most part, a lot of people are emotionally shutting down, and what's there to pick up this void? Good, bad, or indifferent, because Ring of Honor wasn't in a place to do it, MLW wasn't in a place, and Impact wasn't in a place. But the new thing, this AEW, is there to pick up the void, and they're the cool kid in school for the time being.
Right. I agree. So I think we covered a lot, Mikey. We're almost going an hour. Anything you want to close off? Anything?
No, I just thank you for I've been following all the debates, and I know Jimmy's very passionate. And once again, it's a guy like that, a guy like you, a guy like myself. We have differing views. We might agree, disagree. I still stand by this, and it's not to rip on any of us, but just something for anyone that's hung with us for an hour here is to realize that our lives are precious too. And we don't have to sit around wondering what, Renee Young and Dean Ambrose did on the couch on a Thursday night.
Yes.
And like what type of anchovies they had on their pizza, or do they discuss AEW versus WWE in between lovemaking sessions?
Right. That's why I get upset. This wrestling on social media has devolved into gossip columns and gossip rumors, and we who cares? Who cares?
Well, we're all grown men, and we should all be seeking our own fortune and fame and having our own lives. So, the fact that, a guy like Jimmy, who's entirely very intelligent when it comes to wrestling, and I think I could be wrong, but I think he's a married man and everything. So, I just wish that Jimmy, but I'm speaking about myself, really. Yes. Like all of us kind of say, okay, let's maybe tone down our wrestling passion for things that actually give us our own lives meaning and purpose. Because, quite frankly, the WWE is not going to hire any of us.
No,
I mean, that's just a sad reality.
WWE doesn't care.
No, they don't.
But it's too much. It's becoming, people are getting worked with all these gossip rumors and stuff.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pick on Jimmy. I'm just using him as an example of a passionate guy. And like I said, it's really about myself, too, because as you know, Frank, I'm going through transition. I'm changing a lot of things about my life, geography, and so forth. So I'm looking to promote the Avalonia Film Festival, which filmfreeway.com. You can find Avalonia Festival, MikeMessier.com. I've got a theater festival coming up in 2020. So, I mean, Avalonia 7 Theater Festival. So there's enough things that I've done, scripts that I've written to keep me busy that I don't need to worry about why the WWE is in such a position or what Tony Khan had for breakfast. I've got my own problems to think about.
I agree. All right, Mikey, thank you very much. And I'll upload this very quickly.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.